Hello, Brian Barrett checking in.
Hey, Brian, it's Jacob.
Jacob, how are you?
Good. How about yourself?
Well, I'm keeping warm.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get set up in a couple minutes here. Ron said he'll be a couple moments late, so probably start 5 after.
Okay, no problem. I'll mute myself then, Jacob.
Sounds good. I will too. Thank you, sir.
Take care.
evening. 7:04 p.m. This is the regular Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors meeting. This meeting is called to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Members present include Vice Chair Robert Lovenheim, Supervisor Brian Barrett, myself, Chairman Jacob Pride, our Office Manager Julia Heilicke, our Solicitor Ron Karasak, and our Engineer John Tressler. We also have some members of the public either here in person and on Zoom. Our first order of business, we have two sets of minutes, the January 3rd, 2022 reorganizational meeting and the January 11th, 2022 regular work session. At this point, it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to approve both.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Lovenheim. Do I hear a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mr. Barrett. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Next item is public comments on the agenda. This is something I intend to change so it's phrased a little more appropriately, but that'll probably take place at the next meeting, just so we make sure everyone has the opportunity to comment but doesn't get confused by this portion, because the public comment people are generally concerned about is with each agenda item, but then there is a general public comment at the end, so that is where we'll entertain that. We do not have any public hearings or plans to act on this evening. We also do not have any announcements for executive sessions or anything else. Due to time constraints, I'm going to move to item C under new business. We have Mr. Matthew Muir here from the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks. He's here with us on Zoom to give us an overview of Resolution 496, the opposition to increased weight and sizes of trucks. Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yep. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm with an organization called the Coalition Against Bigger Trucks, and that, our name is very descriptive. We're not opposed to big trucks, which are essential to, almost everything we have and the function of our economy. It's proposals to make it bigger that we take issue with. When I say bigger, there's a couple places where that is proposed. In the state legislature, there have been a variety of proposals to have exemptions for specific commodities, ranging from, 80,000 pounds being the standard weight limit, raising weights to 95,000, 105,000 pounds and beyond. Each year, more and more commodities are proposed, and it's only a matter of time before that list, which is already over 20, becomes so large, it just becomes a mess, and the idea would be, they simply would want to raise weights statewide. Federally, proposals were defeated in 2015 that would raise weights from 80 to 91,000 pounds on the interstate system and the length of double trailers. So we are primarily opposed to this due to public safety and infrastructure concerns. Our coalition is very broad, really three categories, the first being municipal governments and their associations. So that includes the associations in Pennsylvania that represent boroughs, township supervisors, and the municipal league, as well as federally, cities, county engineers, public works. Second group is law enforcement. A heavier truck is harder to stop, harder to control, and when involved in a crash, it's going to be more dangerous. That's why we work with the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police, the sheriffs, the state troopers, and then those same groups at the federal level. Third group, we work with transportation. Not a big surprise, most of our funding does come from the rail industry. Heavier and longer trucks divert freight from the rails to our roads. But what is surprising is we work with a large segment of the trucking industry. It tends not to be drivers or even small companies that want these changes. Their costs go up while their standard of work goes down, increased dangers, and not enough reciprocating profit. It's very large companies like Amazon, UPS, FedEx, beer distributors that want to change this. The way I see it, I get my Amazon packages in a day or two already. I think they're doing okay. So ultimately, US DOT examined this issue in 2016, and their recommendation was no increases in length or weight. When it comes to weight, particularly at the state level, Pennsylvania is at about the 5th worst bridges in the nation when it comes to bridges being rated in fair or poor condition. A lot of those bridges fall under, township governments, county governments, municipal governments, and even at the state level, all levels are struggling to properly maintain infrastructure. So as we work to improve our infrastructure, which both citizens and businesses rely on, the last thing we need is even heavier loads on our roadways. And then, of course, safety. They looked at states that allow some of these heavier trucks and found dramatically higher crash rates. One danger in particular is if the state were to raise weights and the interstates maintained their 80,000 pound weight limit, it would divert traffic from the interstate system to local roads. So that's kind of all the substance I've got. I think it's a very simple, straightforward point. We have enough issues with infrastructure. We have enough issues with public safety. Let's maintain existing size and weight laws. We're not looking to lower them or anything as we work to address those challenges. Really, the most compelling reason the most compelling strategy we have and why we've been successful is working with hundreds of local government officials and members of law enforcement throughout the state. You're the ones that will look over the safety of your roads, manage budgets that involve road construction. Sharing the implications this would have in your area has been the most compelling story that can be told to state legislators. The resolutions are an incredible tool and can share that opinion with the legislature. So with that, that's all I've got. Any questions for me?
Well, I just hope, Matt, that you're limiting yourself to big trucks, because I wouldn't want you to try to regulate giant trucks like the ones that are at county fairs. I think my kid would be very unhappy if those are taken off the roads.
Absolutely. And I think, though, are you talking about like the rides and things like that?
No, I'm talking about the pickups with giant tires that sort of climb over each other.
Yep. No, like monster trucks.
Yeah, monster trucks, not giant trucks, monster trucks.
Yep. No, we're very, very closely tailored to overweight semi trucks. And yeah, monster trucks would fall under the legal weight limit, so I think we're good there.
Okay.
That aside, Brian, do you have any questions or any of my other colleagues?
No, I'd like it. Let me just say, Brian Barrett here, supervisor. I'm on Zoom, and I looked to see some of the research, and I saw what our own Robert Levenheim has done, and he did some good research on it also. And I believe on tonight's agenda, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, do we have a resolution that we're going to address?
Yes, we do have a resolution.
We are, and we'll do it under this, under category C. Okay, so no, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Muir, for that presentation. It's much appreciated, especially as I know the House Transportation Committee in Harrisburg yesterday already approved moving from 80,000 to 82,000. I know that's not quite a huge increase, but it is a problem. So we'll see where that lands in the legislature. That said, a motion would be in order on resolution number 496.
All right, I'll make the resolution to approve the motion to approve resolution number 496, opposing increased weight on trucks.
Motion by Mr. Levenheim. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Barrett. Any public comment before we vote? That's it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good.
Resolution is adopted. Mr. Muir, would you like a signed copy sent, emailed to you or something like that?
Yep, that would be perfect, and we can coordinate after the meeting. But yeah, that would work well.
All right, sounds good.
Okay,
thank you
for
very
your
much.
time and for the successful passage.
Absolutely. Okay, getting back into order here. is item A under new business, which is the discussion for the Monroe County Open Space and Pocono Mountain Visitors Bureau grants. And I'll say grants because there are two of them. We had talked about this at quite a few meetings, and I sat down with Julia and I talked about a couple of my ideas. I am not sure if anyone else had emailed, but I think at least as far as the Pocono Mountain Visitors Bureau grant, that's a really good opportunity, especially for smaller applications. And, you know, Julia and the rest of the team have made two really good applications for two different local organizations that I think would match up really well because they're about $5,000 in total each, and the match would be 50-50, so around $2,500. And I think there's a really good way to structure it. Presently, we've applied to 1% for nature, and that application is due to be announced whether or not we received it on February 22nd. Julia, do you want to talk about that application briefly?
Sure. The 1%.
To remind the public.
Sure. The 1% for nature grant application that we applied for was approximately a $5,000 project aimed at putting double trash enclosures at River's Edge Bike Park as well as Mountain Spell. We applied in tandem with Smithfield, and one of the ideas with this, because that grant will be announced later in February, if we do not receive the application, we can recycle the application that was already put the time in or reapply under PMCB.
I think, you know, with that application, I think that should be the first priority, just because we can recycle that information if we don't get it. It also goes directly to the Visitors Bureau mission that they had on their grant application or letter about the application, in that we need to, you know, focus on things that either attract people here or keep things clean that people use. And I think, you know, if we don't get it through 1% for nature, which is they only have, I think, $40,000 available.
It is a smaller pot of money compared to the open space
right.
and PMCB.
Right, because both of the other organizations have $300,000 to throw around, so I think that's a reasonable thing. And then the other one was potentially recycling another application that we made, which would clean up the garden and purchase bees for the township so we can restart our apiary program, as well as some wildflowers. And Julia creatively called that one the Be Kind update that we applied for from Pennsylvania Forests and Waters via DCNR money. So I think those are two options. I'm curious what...
That's really good one, cleaning up the garden.
And back to the beehives too, I believe.
Right.
We've got a good thing going there, so I think it would serve us well to keep investing in it, protecting it and growing it, the garden and the beehives.
All right, so do we want to maybe flip that and do the Be Kind update as our first priority application, and keep the 1% for nature one and hope that we get that one?
We could start there, I think, Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, alternatively for the open space grant, which also has a $300,000 pot of money. I know we talked about a lot of other things, but generally, the lower the ask, I think you two have seen we've fared better. This is the first time it's open, I think, since I've been a supervisor. But if we don't get one of those, potentially we could structure them as the next application for open space. I know that, you know, in some respects, we're doing a lot, so I wouldn't want to overburden everybody with a significant application, but if we were able to use one that's strong that we haven't received before, you know, maybe that's a good option to use those two as alternating priorities between the two applications.
Yep. And Jacob, another thing I'm thinking, the educational value involved with both of those projects is significant. To get involved, our schools residents for both the garden and the beehives.
Have either of you seen the little Smithfield public garden or community garden, rather?
Yes.
Which is really very nicely done. And we might get some ideas from there about what we could apply for specifically when the grant we'd like to do. It's fences, it's walkways. There's even what would you call not a kiosk, but a larger.
Oh, like a sign that has some information on it.
No, it's a area where you can sit. Looking for
a gazebo?
A gazebo, yeah. A gazebo with some chairs in it, just so people can enjoy the gardens. It's kind of a nice thing. So
that's where I would be.
yeah. Anyway, that's just some ideas there.
Well, we're really running up against time at this point, so maybe we want to just settle on maybe packaging the. That's tough because we have two solid applications. I mean, I'm hoping we actually do get the 1% for nature grant. I think there's a reasonable chance.
There's only 3 days between notification for the 1% for nature and applying for the MCOS. So something the board can consider would be maybe trying the Be Kind update for the Monroe County open space.
Yeah.
And then if we get 1% for nature, that's fantastic, and we can circle back again to what we're going to apply for to Pocono Mountain Visitors Bureau, because that application is due on the 31st of March. But if we don't get the 1% for nature grant, then I have another month to apply, recycle that application, get the letters cleaned, or rather changed over to the new organization for Middle Smithfield, and then reapply for that.
All right, so I think that makes sense. So then we would use the Be Kind update for Monroe County open space. Sounds like we all are into that, so we can upgrade the garden. And then for the Visitors Bureau, we're thinking, all right, as I try to do the mental gymnastics into thinking which ones we're flipping and which ones we're...
Then the Visitors Bureau could be a backup for the 1% for nature if we don't get it. But if we do get it, we could consider pursuing another project for it. At which point you need to discuss that at your first March meeting and give me direction quite quickly.
Right.
Good enough.
I think that's a good plan. All right. I assume that we have consensus on those?
Yes.
Sounds good. Our next item up, B, is discussing the Economic Development Zone draft amendment. What's before us specifically is just the differences between the two versions, because Ron had already sent us the completed draft, and then when Julia reviewed it, she proposed a rewrite of Section 6, subsection 30, and then subsection 308B3. Julia, do you want to talk about the differences? I think you emailed these to us.
I did see you guys had plenty of time to review it, but in essence, after you met and discussed changes you wanted to make, I implemented all of those changes into the document so you have it. But after having listened to the meeting, I was unsure exactly how you wanted this changed. So I took a look at it and noticed that it seems a little bit out of order now that both Ron and I had added our comments and added things. So you'll have two pieces of paper in front of you. One with the way that it's currently written, and one with just a proposed edit that deletes one section, specifically Section D, that I personally felt was a little bit repetitive related to Section E. And it just shifted the items around past that. There's really no change in wording. But obviously, because I was unclear of the direction the board wanted to take and then wanted to propose this, I didn't want to throw it in without bringing your attention to it.
Right, because then once we decide upon which version we like, then we can actually have the planning commissions look at it like we
Yes.
voted on.
Once you make a decision on that, and I put in this section to the ordinance that you've already looked over, then it will shift to the planning commission's review, and then eventually come back to you for adoption.
Okay. Now, do you want to describe your rewrite in relation to the current draft? So I think everyone understands that generally, sorry, I'll interrupt for 1 second, that generally this is to clarify the structuring of different uses, essentially, in the same structure.
Yeah, the changes that I made, current item C, I shifted to item A, so it's just shifting up 2 bullet points. Item B of the current stays item B of the proposed, and I shifted item A of the current to item C of the proposed, and shifted items E and F underneath C, and added actually 5 words to the end of that new item, so it now reads, residential uses shall not be located on the first ground floor of any mixed-use building, except in the following circumstances. And those are the 2 provisions, items E and F, where you say that you can have mailboxes, you can have ground floor entrances, et cetera, and all of that other stuff that's in there.
And the language is essentially identical. It's reordering.
And the current item D has been deleted in its entirety, because I felt that it was duplicative of E and does not have the requirement of basically showing a hardship.
Which, can you read what was deleted and then what was, I'm getting confused here, because I'm looking for here's the one you sent, right?
So if you take these 2 and put them side to side.
Okay.
Part I deleted.
Let me read it. Okay, so we deleted that entirely.
Yes, just this item D here.
Yeah, I think we should leave that in, because it is, I pointed out in a memo I think I wrote this morning, yesterday, that it is different than the E, correct? E is if the ground floor is not suitable for,
Right, this doesn't,
for commercial reasons.
right, this change would not allow anyone to just willy-nilly take advantage of this.
Well, what I pointed out, did anyone read that?
I did.
That, there are circumstances, and I know that, Gateway is up against some of this now, where, reasons, for a variety of reasons maybe, commercial should not be on first floor of what's going to be residential above. They should be separate. Well, if that's true, then it seems like this is okay, because it's saying you still have to have that much commercial. You're not being able to skimp on it, but at least you can separate it from residential not being in the same building and still saying in the multi-building area it's a mixed-use building. And I pointed out, it's just something I happened to remember, because I thought, why do we need that too? I thought the same thing. But I was talking about a hotel I used to stay in. It was part of another development. It was commercial. And every time a fire alarm would go off in the commercial part, everybody would have to evacuate the hotel. There probably are other things like that, and only an engineer or developer would really know.
And it was in the same structure?
Right.
Okay.
So, and, people would have to pile out of their hotel rooms into the freezing street at, 2 a.m.
Right.
Because, whatever was going on in the other one, and I talked to the fire department once, they said, yeah, we get one of these every week. And some of it should be fixed, some of it, whatever problems there are, it's just one aspect of saying that a commercial building in some ways is not suitable for people also living in the same structure because of those kinds of things. So I think this is a good thing to leave in because it does cover those circumstances, and then at the same time, is also saying you have to have so much commercial. You can't skip on it. But if it has to be in a different building, if you have multiple buildings and residential, well, that's okay.
Now, can I ask a question for clarification to see if my way of understanding it, that it's simpler, is in fact saying the same thing? So, essentially, you're kind of mandating, or the idea is because there will be some mixed use in portions of the ED zone, even as it is written today, without the skinny amendment, as we talked about. You're saying that, still no residential street frontage. You're saying, like, if you're going to have a mixed-use development or incentivized development, essentially, you cannot have, it has to be in the back. You have to have residential in the back. It cannot be seen from, or not seen, but it can't front on the street.
Well, that's one aspect, but let's say, the only reason now that we have, if you eliminate that D, where you could say you don't have to have commercial in a building because it doesn't front on the street. What I'm saying is there are circumstances where you don't want residential sharing a building with commercial because of the kind of use of the commercial. It might be something that is just incompatible with people living in a building. And the circumstance I was talking about, it was like some kind of department store, all right? But if that's the case, it seems like, okay, put all residential in one building. Maybe it doesn't have street frontage, but one building, and say, well, if we subtract the commercial from that building, then it has to be in another building. It's the same kind of thing you're talking about. I think it just defines it a little better if we leave it in. It's like two different circumstances. I think it's a little clearer, even if it's a little redundant. You just leave it there. So we've covered in both cases. Are we understanding each other or no?
No, I think I understand it a little better.
Yeah.
John, do you have any?
I don't have any substantive comments. I don't think there's any problem with leaving D in because it doesn't seem to be in conflict. So as long as it's not in conflict, I don't see a problem. Minor comment, if you do adopt the proposed rewrite, I would suggest under C, maybe that's going to become D, I don't know, but whatever. I think you should have C, then you should have 1 and 2 as opposed to A and B.
So it kind of outlines that they're two different.
No, I'm just saying that it goes to CA, and typically in ordinance writing, it should be C1 and then C2. Just a grammatical thing.
Oh, okay.
Darn Microsoft Word.
Well, anyway, I'm just for leaving it in Julia's original rewrite, and even if we number it differently, leaving that stuff in, I think she did a good job on that. And originally, I thought it was redundant, but thinking it over, I think we should leave both of them.
Brian, do you want to add any thoughts?
I'm just kind of thinking I'm understanding most of what has been said. And I just my one concern is unforeseen consequences. And John Tressler, you don't see any problem with this. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't think D is in conflict with E, which would be my concern by leaving it in. But I don't think it's a conflict. I think it probably helps clarify.
Ron, you were gonna?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, again, the concept here for the mixed use is that you generally want your commercial on the first floor, and then second floor or above, you want your residential. So this is trying to address sometimes when things don't work out the way you want. In the D as it presently exists, you're talking about a multi-building development project.
Right.
Where E as it presently exists talks about a building as such, or maybe more than one building that doesn't have access to street frontage. So I believe they are perhaps different. It's just a policy call as to what the supervisors want to do. I think you can keep them in, or you can write them out. It's your call as the supervisors.
Well, I guess I don't want to be in the position when we have a land development plan of being like, what does this mean? So, I mean, is there a way to marry these two? I'm not saying that just to obfuscate, but is there a way to marry these two to make it read the grammar that Julia wrote, but leave in the original provision and just organize it the way Julia did? If that makes sense?
I think the best way is just to leave it the way Julia did it.
Well, so the current draft, Ron wrote, the proposed rewrite, Julia wrote.
Right.
Both have comments.
Well, I'm looking at the one that Julia's, Julia's, what should I say? Her proposed rewrite number 1, which has in the D, as opposed, D and E. I think, there's less ambiguity in that.
Well, Robert, let me clarify. The D of the current is removed in the proposal.
Oh, okay, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to keep it as it's currently written?
As you wrote it here, okay?
Yeah, that says current draft on it.
All right, well,
So this
what
is
says
the,
what?
this is the
Proposed rewrite? Yeah, I believe it in the current draft. I think there's less ambiguity there.
I would probably tell you, Julia, is that the present D becomes C, and your present rewrite C becomes D. I think it might work out that way a little better, perhaps. So the D is C, which says, okay, if there's development and there's not enough, blah, blah, blah. And then your C, or your D now says, and residential uses aren't located except for 1 and 2. Probably would be okay like that. Still a little confusing, I agree, but that's probably how I would structure it, but you're the boss, so whatever you want to do is okay with me.
You're saying that from what's called the current draft here, right?
Well, I'm looking at the proposed rewrite, and I would say that as the proposed rewrite, the D that's here, the D that's in the present one becomes the C in the rewrite, and then the C in the rewrite becomes D. I think, I think you know what I'm saying, I think.
So what Ron, and please correct me if I'm wrong here. So this wording.
D wording.
The D wording in the current draft.
Yeah.
Would shift and be inserted.
You need to
Right
call
here.
up Coach Dowd to get one of his charts.
So then this one, because this wording, this D wording would be shifted here, this would then become D.
Right,
And
so.
have these as this.
So we're saying that the
So
same things would be in it.
Keep all of
Same
the
things would be in it, but that little bit of different rewrite that Julia did with some of the language, she did rewrite the sub A and some other things, keep those in. But I agree your D should be there because that is a separate factual pattern that we should address.
Okay. Assuming we solve this part of it, can we move back to the major mixed use, which is not something she looked at to rewrite, but it's something in your draft, okay? Which is 305.
Okay.
Right, which is also part of what we're doing here. That's what you had it in your draft, 305.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna get to
which
the draft.
which we're now calling major mixed use. Remember?
Yeah, sort of, but
It's in the. Julia sent three files. That was one of them.
looking at the 305 here section.
305 is called major. We call it mixed use.
Mixed use
Mixed use, but we
Okay.
decided to call it major mixed use.
Okay, I'm looking at what I've seen here.
Okay.
Okay.
There are a few things in here that I just questioned. I think we could just go over them quickly and decide what we're gonna do with them.
Robert, what page are you on?
I'm looking at page 3 of the marked up version. That's what I'm looking at the top, it says section 3, and underneath that it says section 305.C. It's with a major mixed-use development. See it?
Okay, just some
I have
points.
to find my copy.
Are you there, Jacob?
You can
Three
move
of the
along, I just have
marked-up
to
version.
find,
All right.
At the top.
3, under residential uses, we before increased the tract for major mixed use to 50 acres. Before it was 25. I would argue in favor of going back to 25, and the reason is this, that looking at what we have in the township, 50 really, it comes down to Mountain Manor. That's it. At 25, it could be part of Mountain Manor, which may be all that's available for this. It could be the quarry on across from Alaska Pete's. It could be Shawnee Mountain if the zoning was changed. It could be Light of the World. I mean, at least it's saying that this could possibly be put somewhere else. But when you say 58 acres, you're kind of cutting out everything but Mountain Manor. Secondly, you know, it has to be fronting on 2 state roads. I think just 2 roads is plenty. Why state roads?
do you mind if I interject briefly? I just wanted to say, I think I would submit that the differences between major mixed use and incentivized are somewhat dubious as is, though I think the rewrite makes it clearer, as we talked about when we all reviewed this sometime in November. But I think there really aren't many differences between a major mixed use and a major mixed use and an incentivized development, I think, except for some parking requirements.
No, it's more than that. If you look at the ordinance, there's a whole section about, the intention is towards, call it a village by itself. It's, housing, commercial, bike paths, sort of creating something that's a new little town in itself. And it does say that in the ordinance. The original ordinance, it's very clear about that. And I think the intention was, and I remember Doug Scriber saying this at the Planning Commission hearing, was to do things that were like what Tom Comita had proposed in his master plan. And major mixed use is that, and it's sort of defined as that in the ordinance now. But that's very different than, let's say, building 3 units or 5 units of commercial with residential on top of them. This is like creating a new town. I think that's the idea of it. In a way, you can say Gateway is kind of that, because it's got commercial, it's got residential, it's got age restrictions, it's got sidewalks, it'll have, amenities. It'll be a village in itself. And I think that's what the intention is and was. But that's why I'm saying, and I think 50 acres kind of makes it too restrictive. And 25 is a pretty good-sized tract. The same with, why does it have to be on 2 state roads? Why not just, it's got to be fronting on 2 roads. Then there were a couple other things in.
Let's address this.
Brian here. I think the reason that it was 50 acres was just pragmatic. It wouldn't have happened unless we did that, and we kind of sculpted this ordinance with the 2 state roads, so to set up a system where it wouldn't be easily duplicated in places where we didn't want it. That's the intent of it when we go back, and I forget how many years when we began that. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you worked with Attorney Wolf on coming up with that.
Brian, I think it was, when I read it, it was 25 acres. We increased it to 50 because, as Jacob said, we wanted to make it clear that it was different from just a mixed use. I think it's too much. And remember, most of what we're talking about isn't zoned in the ED zone anyway. It could possibly at some time in the future be moved into it, but there's no incentive when you say it has to be 50 acres. Then we're talking about Mountain Manor and that's it.
I guess I would submit to you this. I personally am fine with leaving it as it is, because the idea with the major mixed use, like you talked about with the village thing, is diverse forms of housing. At Smithfield Gateway and other projects that are mixed use in nature are sort of village-esque, but they're not quite, they're obviously not a private development. They're, apartment buildings with some commercial. I think when you read the existing 305, and because it doesn't change in the rewrite, is that you can do all sorts of other housing in a major mixed-use development. So, like, technically with Smithfield Gateway, that is allowed. They haven't done this, and I have no reason to anticipate that they would, but single-family dwellings and townhomes are permitted in a, mixed-use development of that size. I personally think that would kind of, because like I said, I think everyone knows that I like the concept of multifamily dwellings, but I think that keeping it to what essentially amounts to 2 or 3 properties makes sense, because you don't want to take away that portion of the commercial zone. You want to leave the commercial zone generally for commercial things, though I support multifamily dwellings generally. I think that it kind of keeps the commercial integrity, but allows for, in certain parcels, the mixed use. Personally, I don't want to see a bunch of townhomes. Not that I oppose townhomes, but I don't want to see them in this zone. I'd be fine if they were all in, R2, but I think that it makes sense to kind of limit the major developments like that to those big properties that I don't even know if they're all in the ED zone anyway, but have something toward the, akin to Mountain Manor would make sense for that. That's what was proposed years ago. I remember we dug out those plans. I guess that's just where I am. I don't want to pontificate, but.
Let me move along to a couple other things here. Permitted uses, car dealerships. Talking about in this kind of a.
No, I thought that part was supposed to be out. I thought those were conditional uses.
Well, it says permitted uses. Car dealerships.
New and used, Robert?
That's what I read in it. I don't know if that's been taken out, but I don't think so. Anyway,
Should be.
Seems like it's not what we want there. And the other thing is.
Hold on, Robert.
Yeah.
Automotive and vehicular sales and rentals are conditional use.
Is it conditional use?
Yes.
All right. Well, then I guess we're okay. And the other thing I saw in here was with signs, a huge section on number E on signs, and it's pretty much redundant of what we have in the signage ordinance, which
Robert, where are you in the ordinance?
Huh?
Where are you in the ordinance?
I've got it under E, somewhere in the ordinance.
What page?
In a mixed, I don't know, I copied this off. In a mixed-use development, if a mixed-use development is approved to include a total of more than 150,000 square feet, commercial, blah, 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 and it goes on what the signage is. Well, this is all covered in the signage ordinance, which we're talking about revising. I don't know why we can't just say here, signage shall be determined by, the rules already in place in the signage ordinance.
I think you might have copied something else, because the one that I'm looking at from Ron, there's only 2 mentions of signs, and they don't have any sections.
Well, I copied it from what's in on our website, because I didn't have anything else to go on. from Ron, because I don't think we've addressed most of this stuff. I think we addressed a few things in there, but I don't know if we've done this at all, but it's from our website, the zoning portion of our website.
So you're on the current code as it stands right now?
I guess so, yeah. But all I know of what Ron has revised, 305 is basically changing to major mixed use and putting in 50 acres rather than 25. I'm just saying, let's take out what we don't need here because it's covered somewhere else.
The signage portion you're saying, I don't
Yeah.
have to see where that would.
Under 27, and then look under mixed use, it's under 305,
Okay.
major mixed use, it's called.
Right.
Like that, it's E1, A2, goes on and on.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, chapter 27, section 305, mixed-use development options.
Right. Keep going down, that's what I did.
And then item E, and then Edward.
Item E, signs, if a mixed-use development is approved to include a total of more than 150,000 square feet, commercial building floor area, then the sign provision, section 504 of the chapter of A, shopping regional signs shall be allowed to be used for the mixed-use development except for the following specific modifications.
Right. So that's these signage regulations that are in the existing ordinance are specific for a regional shopping center.
But I think we have those in the signage ordinance anyway. Monument signs and everything.
Right, but they are, except if something is a regional shopping center, whatever that may mean, that, they have additional, I don't know, because I haven't read that section of 504, the original one, in a while, but it either affords more flexibility or is stricter. I would guess more flexibility, but I think that's all. It incorporates 504 by reference, but allows other specific things. But that's not touched in the draft ordinance.
Well, my worry is that when we look at the signage ordinance toward revising it, then we got to revise this potentially too.
Well, if we get to that point, then if we get to that point, it looks like that would just be amended by in codification.
What you can do, Robert, if it helps, is if you look at the list of uses.
Yeah.
In the provision that was provided by Julia on page 6. At the top, all the way to the right-hand side, which are all the way, but 4 over, which are accessory uses, it says signs as provided hereunder. You can just change that to say signs as per the existing ordinance.
Signs what?
Signs as per the existing sign ordinance.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, you could put that there, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure where you're reading in that other language, because I don't have that section of the.
He's reading that from the existing code.
I'm looking at the skinny ordinance, and again, top of page 6. For the accessory uses, it says signs as provided hereunder, it just signs as per the existing sign ordinance.
I would do that. I mean, I think it's all covered. And there are things here,
Put that in there and that'll take care of that.
There's one thing in here where highline signs shall be separated from each other by a minimum distance of 300 feet. I know that Gateway is planning on 225, and I'm wondering, who picked 300? Is that arbitrary? Or is 225 okay? You know, it's like, where do these numbers come from?
that may have come from a curative amendment that never went to its fulfillment. And that was when the sign companies were coming in to talk to us. And for some reason, and I don't know, was it arbitrary? It was more than arbitrary. It was pretty clever in that it pretty much assured this one company, and I won't name names, was almost assured of having the right distances to have all the signs on Route 209.
But I think what you're referring to is the billboard company, right?
Right.
The billboard company.
The signage.
This is just for signs at a shopping center. It's not billboards. It's, the monument signs where entrances are at shopping centers. I know what you're talking about. I think the billboards were 400 feet or something. I can't remember.
Even more,
but, yeah, but this is just, the entrances, and what DePetris is saying is, look, I've got 3 entrances. I've got 225 feet between each of them. I just want to put up a sign at each one. And I noticed this one says 300
Robert,
feet.
when they sat with us and our professionals and their professionals, and this was agreed to. I don't know who did it. Sounds to me like it was, I just don't know, but it wasn't well thought out. Again, here we go. Unforeseen consequences. So they agreed to it and helped to write it, and agreed and thought it was a good whatever it was with this distance. And now they're realizing that with the 3 entrances, it would interfere with what they want. So, and I don't know. That's easily changed.
It's very difficult, Brian, to read this and say, where did this all come from? Was it Judy Goldstein? Was it the sign company? Was it, you don't know. I don't know. Yeah,
we do. It was Smithfield Gateway and Smithfield Township, pretty much. I don't think Judy really got too much involved in it. Judy and Tom Committer were not so much into the Smithfield Gateway, and I think, Robert, that's where it came from. Everybody thought, yeah, it's a good idea, it makes sense, it's no problem. And now we're realizing that because they're getting to the point of coming in with a plan, that no, it maybe not work. And again, what's to be lost by changing it so that they can do that?
Well,
I don't see any problem with that.
Sometime we're going to have to face it. I don't know what we do, whether we do it now, whether we do it later.
I would advise this. That is a highly technical thing, perhaps more technical than the skinny ordinance itself.
All right, well, let's leave it out of the skinny ordinance.
I think you could say, where is it? Sorry. The signs provided here under. Perhaps you can address it as Ron has suggested. Now, the goal of today, because we received one question about where can we see a draft of this. Because it is a draft, there is no publicly available version. Yeah, because we have not voted on it to send it anywhere. But
look, what we know is this: the skinny ordinance, as we call it, which is basically what 308. That one,
more or less.
Well, that's pretty much what we've gone through.
That is the one portion that I needed clarification from the board on. The entire document, the entire ordinance that the board discussed back in December is what you're considering for this.
All right, so if you forget everything I'm talking about here and just go with that, that's what we can agree to pass on to the Planning Commission tonight, correct?
Yes, so I was going to say, I think what you mentioned.
Can I pause you for a moment? Martha, to address your comment, Robert was looking at the current code that we have on our website under E-code. So he wasn't referencing a proposed draft, he was referencing what is currently in use from the township.
Correct.
Sorry, thank you.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, to that point, once we vote on this, because we already technically did vote on this, but we didn't finalize it yet because there was this clarification.
Right.
It sounds like, I know it sounds like the two of you agree about changing something with the signs, but I don't want to say not tonight, but not tonight. I think that we can put it in like the specific change you mentioned about the 300 to 225, I think I wouldn't mess with that tonight, but it sounds like there's at least consensus among us to send this to the commissions, provided it meets the detailed but not detailed change that Julia and Ron have reconciled their two versions, which I take it will have some sort of guide so we can talk about that. And then it sounds like you want it to say in the uses, signs as permitted per whichever subsection of Chapter 27 is the sign.
Just say per the existing sign ordinance, then you can deal with the sign ordinance again, but you have that addressed here. And
right.
The other issue about the two state roads, I'm not sure where that comes from, but I would be okay, but John would have to weigh in. As long as it says two roads improve the township standards, I'm okay with that. They don't have to be state roads as long as they're roads.
Yeah.
Improve the township standards, but let's see what the big guy over here says about that. I'm okay with that.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, you just don't want them on a dirt lane or something that doesn't have adequate width.
Right. Well, I'm fine with that, keeping the 50 acres though. I personally think
I've
it makes.
conceded that.
Okay.
I'm beyond that.
All right. I just want to make sure. So I just want to know, because I'm going to ask one of you in a moment to make a motion, and I know whoever does it will say so moved because it will be complex. But that we need, it would be appropriate, and a motion would be in order to be made to formally request reviews from both planning commissions on the proposed skinny ordinance with the provisions that it reflects the ability to change signage codes accurately, or meet whatever the amended signage code is. Not saying that means we're changing it, but it references the existing code, and that it also reflects the reconciled changes made in tonight's meeting as per insert email from tomorrow. And the state roads issue.
I'll
And
make
the
that
50
motion.
acres.
Yeah.
Yes, 50 acres.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Moved by
I can't repeat it as well as Jacob could, but I'll make it.
It would take a lot to try to do that. But motion by Mr. Levenheim, and Brian, did you second that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Barrett. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So, that said, though it is convoluted, we will see feasibly tomorrow a version that reflects these changes, because they are slight, but they will greatly help anyone trying to read them. And then, once that's done, we will then publish that on the website so the public can look, and then the planning commissions will get their copies so they can review it.
We should make sure they get this on their docket for
Yes.
February. Enough of this already.
They certainly will. Okay. Next is item D, considering the approving Penndot finding for the 2019-2020 liquid fuels audit. Now, this is because there's a somewhat antiquated billing practice by the company that did our tires, and they invoice anything that the township is affiliated with to the township. So, in this case, it was actually tires for a fire truck, which we agreed to pay for, but because it was not distinct on said invoice, it was paid from liquid fuels. Penndot has said it is okay that you, it's not okay that you did that, but it is okay now because you reimbursed yourself from the general fund and then paid the tires, from there. So it's a wash. There's no fee, but in what would normally be boilerplate, which, I know Brian can attest to, when Liquid Fuels does the audit, usually there's no formal vote or discussion on approving said audit because there's no issue. In this case, there's a small issue per Mike Brocious, who works for the Auditor General's office. And it was just that that there's a finding from Penndot for a non-permissible expense for the tires purchased for the fire truck. And like I said, since we paid it back, there's no fine. But we have to indicate on the closing documents, which are typically boilerplate, whether we agree or disagree with the finding. I would submit that it's just better to say we agree with the finding than not, because there's no penalty for doing so. But I did not feel comfortable signing something like that without asking for the consent of the board. So I wanted to talk to you about that.
Sounds okay to me.
And it sounds, it's the practical thing to do, Jacob. And as you said, it literally has been taken care of already. So it just we'll just sign off on it.
Okay. That said, is there a motion to approve the PennDOT finding for the 2019-2020 liquid fuels audit?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Lebanon, second by Mr. Barrett. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Brian?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your vote.
it's aye.
Thank you.
Very good. So now we will sign that document tomorrow, and that'll be that. Next up on our agenda is Godfrey's Ridge. I know this is something that Open Space has talked about. And
well, let me give you some background in this. The board does not know. I wrote this memo board because I wanted to invoke and encourage discussion on it tonight. And as with our experience with DLP, even to get a response out of big companies, what we did there was hold up the cudgel of, well, we could start condemnation proceedings about this. We never had to, because as soon as we even mentioned that, they seemed to appear out of nowhere after, what was it, about a year of not responding to us, Ron?
Yeah,
So
easily.
it encouraged me on Godfrey's Ridge. The story there is this, that I had been meeting with Alice Meehan, who represents the Morrissey Company, last year for several months. We discussed the idea of doing a park as a joint venture, or doing it as a Morrissey Park. And finally, she got back to me and said, we're not interested in being involved, but we're interested perhaps in selling it. So I replied that, well, what would you want for it, and shall we start doing an appraisal between us? I didn't get an answer. Then I asked again. Then I asked again. I never got any answers. And it seemed like when they were interested in putting a major development on 209, where the smoke shop is now, where they own land, they would talk to me. Well, when that interest ceased, I guess, because I never heard about that, suddenly there was no communication. So, as you know, back in December, I asked the board to allow us to make an appraisal of this, since we had no idea what it was. Got an appraisal back. It was a little over $1 million, wasn't it, Julia?
I believe.
$1,020,000 or $1,200,000.
Hold on, I've got the appraisal right here. $1,002,000.
So, based on that, I wrote the draft letter to the board so that we'd have a way of, let's say, discussing this and seeing where we're going on it. And I put several possibilities in it. They could donate it to us. They could sell it to us. But if they did nothing, we might go forward with condemnation proceedings as a park, because it's been used as a park for cross-country biking for probably, 3 generations? I don't know. It's been a long, long time. And that's the use of it, including the area that the county also owns of Godfrey's Ridge, which is part of what the bike tracks are. So yesterday, seeking advice, I sent the draft to Louise Troutman, because I felt like she knows more about this than anybody. I just would like to know what she thought. She got back to me today with two things, some good ideas, and also her concern that if we were going to condemn something, it would reflect badly on the way PHLT tries to acquire things. Of course, PHLT acquires through open space. You can't condemn for open space. You can, as Ron has told me, for parks. Regardless, this is not our intention. It's just something that is a sword we can hold in the background because it gives us some leverage in negotiations.
May I interrupt you for 1 second, Robert?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm writing notes here. Louise Troutman is who? I know the name, but I can't make the connection.
She is the principal of Pocono Heritage Land Trust, okay, to acquire open space land. But she has also been advising our open space committee. And what she admitted to me tonight, just before this meeting, is she sent this letter to everybody in the open space committee. And that's why Lisa, Minio, resigned, in a huff. And it's why
I think Louise, I speak for, let me know when you're.
well, let me finish first. That's why at least Mary Ellen is here tonight because she's on that committee.
And
I'm no longer on the committee, as you know. But I think, first, there's been some miscommunication about what our intentions are and an alarm, because we have no intentions yet. We haven't even discussed it. And I stand by what I've said about if we're going to acquire this, it may come to the point of trying to get their attention in some way. And then I'll go to the question, should we acquire it? This is the last piece of possible parkland that we can build into a new park. It's right now zoned R1. Right now, there's no possibility or no probability it's going to be developed as a subdivision. 20 years from now, we don't know. I'll point to anyone who's been here at least since 2005 and seen the rape of the side of Mount Nebo with the suburb called Oakdale that Wyndham put in. And I think it was one of the major reasons why the Shawnee Preservation Society was formed, that it doesn't matter how steep the slope is. If a developer wants to go in there and thinks he can make money, he'll find a way of doing it. And Missy Pruger and I actually had that conversation, and she admitted the same thing. They'll find a way. So I'd rather have this protected and protected as parkland. Right now it has no protection. So anyway, that's my speech. And I leave it open for discussion and for public comment.
Public comment, Brian Barrett.
Yes, sir.
And I followed this right from the get-go with you, and I did see where Louise Trotman did come back, and she had one, I think, really good suggestion, recommendation. Why don't we let the PHRC, on our behalf, write a letter making an offer? Simple as that.
After what I went through with Louise today, I'd rather not involve them, and also, I think their position is for open space. We're talking about parkland, but she made another good suggestion, which I think is to make an offer to Morrissey. To make a real offer, which we can make subject to getting a grant or covering it through grants, and maybe saying that we have just as this is as you guys did with the transfer of land to the Park Service with Shawnee Preservation, saying, okay, we want to make an offer contingent, and we have 3 years to come up with the money through grants. But here's the offer based on the appraisal, and we want an answer within 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is. You want to make your own appraisal, you can do that. But there's got to be some time limit to say, give us an answer, because what I went through for the last year was nothing. Nothing ever comes back. So that was another of her suggestions. So I think it's very good as a first step.
It was a first step, and I would highly recommend that we do not, or you, I guess you can do it if you want to. I wouldn't send that letter out to her.
No, I wouldn't. Brian.
I think
that letter was... Wait, let Brian go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. The letter hasn't gone out yet, right?
Oh, no, that letter was only for the board to look at to spur on discussion. It was for no other reason.
And that's where we are now. And my part of the discussion, Robert, is I'm just saying, let's do this. Let's put that letter aside, and let's go back to them with an offer. And we'll sit down and we'll work it out. We'll work with Ron, and we'll make an offer that makes sense, that is professional, and see what happens there. We make the offer, though. We say, as you said,
exactly she suggested, and I think that's what we should do. Ron should probably send the letter. We should figure out what the terms are, what we want, and we know the price. I mean, they can argue with the price and do another appraisal, but we can only pay fair market appraisal. And the price that Howard Mandel came up with is based on a lot of public land transfers like this around, because no one has developed a parcel this big. It's 15 acres, a long time. But so it's a pretty fair price, and the big question is how we raise the money, and also just putting them in a position of saying, here's the timeline. Let us know. We don't want to be strung out and never hear from you. That's about it. I think I agree with you completely. That's what we should do.
And I think we just the verbiage, just a little more gentle, Robert. I would just say, okay, here's the situation. We feel that you may consider selling this property, and we're proposing to, and then Ron will take it from there, and then we have a fixed value with an appraisal, and maybe that's the offer we make. I don't know, but it goes. That's all I'm
agree
saying.
with that. I agree with it. And they've already said they may be interested in selling. They just never got back after that. So now we have an appraisal.
Now, the other thing is,
now we have a price.
Part of that gorge area, Robert, is, I don't know how to say it, but we're not there yet. But I don't feel very comfortable even doing anything with it. I think it's as it is, not the whole 300 some acres. You're talking about the bike parks, and that's more down towards through Stroud Township and into the borough, East Strasburg, where they had the bike races and all that kind of stuff. Up in this area, and I believe you've even kayaked that gorge, and you see how beautiful and pristine it is now. I don't know that I would ever want to see it disturbed. Worst case scenario, we start screwing around. Then we move in. That's just the way I feel. Part of our discussion.
If we make it parkland, then we've got the ability to preserve it like it is forever. Right now, we don't own it. We don't control it. It's R1. We don't know what the fate of it will be in 20 years. We have no idea. And we have no power to do anything. But, I'd say that's my view of it. It's leave it for what it's used for now. Maybe we improve the trails a little, but we're not going to change much. It is what it is.
All right.
Okay. Well, that's for another day. I think we make our offer if that's how everybody feels.
All right. Now, but before I ask for public comment, it sounds like the consensus between you two is sending a letter from Ron that makes an offer or to begin negotiations contingent upon grant funding or something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now, before we have the comment, is there a motion to that effect that we can then have the public.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Mr. Levenheim. Do I hear a second? Second by myself. Okay, now we can have public comment.
Okay.
Let me just go, just for our sake, Zoom. Martha and Tim, which one of you wants to go first? I see you have your hand raised.
Well, I can go first. That's fine.
I'll jump in there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, in Louise's letter, she had mentioned that the letter should be certified to the particular person that you want to answer it, which seems pretty obvious. But I didn't hear you mention that while you were talking about getting in contact with them. The other thing I'd like to say is that I'm absolutely 100%.
Right.
I'm absolutely 100% against using condemnation as a cudgel. I just think that's the wrong move. It's not a good look. That's like DEFCON 5, last resort kind of stuff, in my opinion.
Well, I agree. It should be a certified letter, definitely. And we'll take the condemnation off the table for the moment. We don't need to talk about it because that's not what we're doing now. And it is her suggestion, and we'll follow through exactly with that. That's what the motion is on the floor. You know, and let me say this just about condemnation. I don't like it any better than anyone else. I'm just frustrated by people that don't answer us. And this is not the first time that's happened. It's like, you know, a big corporation just doesn't respond. What do we do? So, anyway, call it frustration, condemnation, syndrome.
I'm sorry, Robert. Have you tried to get an? I don't know where they're based, but perhaps you could try and get an appointment and see them in person. I don't know if that makes any. You know, that would be a stronger statement. I'm not sure. I mean, have you tried that? Is that a possibility?
No. As I explained, I met with their representative several times last year, several phone calls, and when it came to the point of saying, well, we'd like to make an offer, after they had said, oh, we might be interested in selling it, it just stopped. And as Brian probably knows, because he's dealt with Morrissey for years, it just, I don't know, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. It's a giant company with a lot of money, and what are we? We're a little township.
And again, I would just go back, and I think, Robert, you and I are on the same page here. We don't send a letter out that we're discussing now, but we do send a letter out. I guess Ron will draft it, and we'll have the input about what we need to put into it, and open the door again to say that, listen, we are interested in this property, and in fact, we'd like to make an offer, and I guess maybe we make the offer in that letter. Simple as that. And then we go from there. God knows what they're going to do with it, but it'll give us something to do, especially Ron. You'll have some fun with the Morrisseys.
Can I jump in?
Martha? Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
Okay, so, Robert, I hear you that you seem a little bit, surprised and taken aback that this letter got shared, and, I guess that wasn't intended. So apparently there was a miscommunication there, and I totally hear your frustration about dealing with people that won't respond to you. I 100% get that. But, and I know you guys are saying that you're taking this possibility, the discussion you wanted to have off the table, but just, as a matter of record going forward, I don't think the township should use that as any kind of a threat ever. I think it makes us, it doesn't look good on the township. So as representatives of us for the township, I would hope you wouldn't do that, in the future. And I think now that you've said in the meeting, in a public meeting, that you've only done that and you don't really intend to do it, it kind of loses its weight anyway. But anyway, so one other comment about there are open space funds, and I don't know what's going on with that. But I believe, Robert, you were negotiating as part of the open space committee when you weren't getting any contact back. But just as a side comment, this is my personal opinion. I don't feel it should ever, when there's a committee like that, be just one person doing the contacting and negotiating. I think it should always be at least 2, maybe 3 people going, trying to make contact and establishing the relationship. So that's just my sense about that. But
Martha said nothing to do with the Open Space Committee. This was a park acquisition, which we've been talking about for years. And it's not open space, it's park. And
right.
It's not anything to do with.
I did hear you say that a couple of times. I heard you. But at one point it was being discussed with the Open Space Committee. Anyway, so bottom line, short version is
wait a minute.
I agree with sending out the letter, making an offer.
This was not discussed in open space. What we discussed is acquiring open space from Rock 10, which would be along the Broadhead Gorge, which is another piece of property there. We never heard from them either, but we just stopped because there was nothing to do. But that was where it came up. It wasn't with the Morrissey property, it was the Rock 10 property, which is right on the gorge. And that just went dead.
Those properties meet. They come together, Robert, right?
Yeah, but the Rock 10 is the area that's along the gorge that for the open space bond we were interested in because it's a beautiful area along the watershed that we hoped we could protect.
Protect perfectly, and not for active or passive recreation even. But anyway, that's for another day.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Rich
and by the way, Martha, I don't know if you know, I'm no longer on the Open Space Committee. Brian has taken over as the liaison.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. Mary Ellen, do you want to?
With all due respect, Robert, I have to say that it's been very frustrating to see you bring up this idea of condemnation proceedings. Several weeks ago, or maybe more like 2 months ago, we had a discussion with you about the idea of condemnation proceedings. By the way, I'm a member of the Open Space, Smithfield Township Open Space Committee, and we had a discussion with you, all the members of the committee, we all said we thought condemnation, the idea of a condemnation proceedings, of the township using condemnation, the threat of condemnation proceedings as a cudgel was a very, very bad idea. And Rich will second me in saying that we had this discussion with you at least a month ago, more like 2 months ago, when you brought this up. You brought this idea to us previously, and we rejected it. We thought we made it very clear. We wanted nothing to do with condemnation.
That was about Rock 10. It wasn't about this at all. And this had started a year before that. What you're talking about is I just explained this, acquiring property that belongs to Rock 10, which is the paper mill group that is along the gorge, the Broadhead Gorge. And as soon as everybody said that, and I only brought it up because I said, I don't know what to do here, I just stopped.
I understand your frustration. I believe your intention is the best of intentions, but we keep trying to tell you that this is entirely the wrong approach. We've tried and tried. And you don't, like you said, this has nothing to do with open space, but why were you sending why did you send the draft of this letter to Louise Troutman? Why did you do that?
Because I think Louise knows a lot about these issues, and I wasn't sure that it read right or that there were other comments or that she has any thoughts. She knows a lot, and she did come through with what we have a motion on the floor to do now, which is send a registered letter or a certified letter, make an offer, and put a time limit on it and see if we get a response. That's all.
But
and that's what we're following through with.
Louise had she had rejected your idea completely about...
You have rejected another idea, okay, which was about Rock 10. I stopped, and I only brought it up because I felt the frustration of not getting answers. I couldn't even do anything about condemnation if I wanted to because you cannot condemn for open space, only for parkland.
All right.
So, I mean, let's separate these things. And I hear this. Nobody likes condemnation. Fine, I understand it.
Robert, All right, hold on. I'm going to reclaim the floor here. If we have to simmer down, I'd advise caution to everybody. The public comment is designed to reflect the sentiment of the public, but it's not designed to be responsive or duplicative, as Ron can attest to.
Right, I've sat here for at least an hour waiting to be heard, and now you're interrupting me, and you're not listening to me. We've tried to, we've tried to tell you before to stop talking about condemnation. The public will, it reflects very badly on the township and on Pocono Heritage Land Trust. We want nothing to do with condemnation.
Do you think it reflects badly on our acquiring a driveway from DLP so that we don't have to replace an old bridge? I mean, we've used the same process for them. Nobody's claiming that's terrible.
No, but you don't see that there is a long history with the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. All of that land was taken by condemnation. There is a very bad feeling among many members of the public about condemnation. Do not talk about it anymore, please.
I can understand what you're talking about now, because I wasn't here then, but I don't know historically that was a terrible period.
Okay, we want nothing. I'm speaking for Pocono Heritage Land Trust now, because I am a member of the board of directors there. We want nothing to do with condemnation proceedings at all. Don't ever bring it up again, please.
Mr. Collins?
Hi,
Nice to see you.
my name is Richard Cullen, and I'm a member of the Smithfield Township Open Space Committee. Also a past chairman of the Smithfield Township Parks and Recreations Committee for about 10 years. I again want to speak against the condemnation wording, and I really appreciate Mr. Barrett's response in a more congenial way of at least reaching them with a figure. But my problem is that we just hocus pocus and changed it from open space to parkland and have never contacted the Parks Committee because it doesn't exist anymore. And that makes it look like just supervisors are playing games instead of a committee overseeing it. That's all I've got to say.
Rich, I'd like you to know that we tried for 2 years to recruit people for the Parks Committee.
Because it's so frustrating, because these games keep being played.
Because what?
These games keep being played.
What games? Did we?
We'll talk about
Wait a minute. For
some
2 years, we have tried to get people to come on the Parks Committee.
Why don't you have people wanting to join the Parks?
I don't know, but you know.
Go look at the record. Ever since we left, there's not been a public meeting or minutes on the township level. I had minutes and meetings every minute for every meeting for 5 years in a row.
Rich, when you ran it, you kept it going. When you left, everybody left with you, and any attempt we ever made to replace people, they came to a meeting and then they never showed up again. Or they said they'd come and they wouldn't. Am I right, Brian?
Look at why maybe they don't feel it's worth their time. Because the community effort is very frustrating in these situations. But again, the hocus pocus now appeared again, and that's what irks the voters. Voters are listening.
Well, I wish the voters would listen to this. We've been looking for volunteers forever, and nobody comes in.
Cut it. You find them.
Yeah, well, you know something? You find them.
Yeah, that's
We'd
right.
love them, wouldn't we, Jacob?
Yes.
We have no one.
Away from the politicians to the public.
All right, hold on.
There's a motion on the floor.
All right, hold on. I will say that we have engaged in a lot of discussion about getting members of the Planning Commission, the Parks Commission. While we've been successful in retaining some members, now a full Planning Commission and with multiple candidates. So I will say we are making a better effort, particularly with the advertising of it on Facebook and the website. So I understand your frustrations, Rich, because when
I'm done with it.
I understand. No, I understand. I'm not asking you to do it. I understand that. But I think that we've stoked some interest, particularly with the grants that we've been receiving with the parks. But we can address that later. The motion on the floor was to send a letter under the terms that we talked about earlier with Ron, and it takes that cudgel off the table and references an offer contingent upon grant funding and a timeline. So, all in favor of the original motion on the floor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, let the record reflect that's passed, and, eminent domain and condemnation is not on the table, and I express sympathy to those, particularly those that knew Nancy Shakaitis and all she, fought for. I think that's important to reflect upon that history. But, I also want everyone to note that I think that, Robert had very good intentions and still does, and I think that we can all appreciate the difficulty in this situation. I think elected officials are often put in these spots. And that said, the next item is ratifying the payment of bills. We have two sets of bills, one from the last week that totaled $8,878.79, and then current bills of $82,717.12 for a grand total of $91,595.91. It includes legal bills, health care, a payroll, as well as other road expenses. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I do. Jacob, again, it's just maybe something we should say each time we get to this part of it, especially when we look at legal and engineering. They're usually large bills, if you will. And what we got to make public is that we do get reimbursement for a good percentage of that. And
absolutely. Perhaps next time we can note that.
Exactly. I was thinking just a disclaimer, if you will. Okay.
That sounds like a good idea. Can definitely do that.
I'll make a motion, then we pay the bills. But as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Barrett, second by Mr. Levenheim. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That said, the last item for consideration, or for our meeting tonight, public comments that were on items that were not on the agenda.
I'd like to ask when we're going to discuss what we're going to do towards the auditors, what the next step is, or what we formulated as far as what we're doing
There's
with
a letter that I
supervisor pay.
prepared this week, Mr. Wilvenheim, and I'll be sending it out tomorrow, because I was in court today and a good bit of yesterday.
A letter to the auditors?
To the auditors, telling them they need to reconvene, that what they did was improper, that what they did was effectively illegal. They can't set caps, they have to set a rate. And although the rate can be hourly, weekly, semi-weekly, monthly, Julia aptly notes that it has to be an hourly rate in your case, because you are part-time employees and you cannot determine whether or not you qualify for overtime. Under the federal law, if you work more than 40 hours, if you don't have an hourly rate because you get time and a half. So
There should be an hour.
It has to be an hourly rate.
Hourly rate and some kind of summary accounting, so each week, we don't come up, we can see that we don't come up to the 42 hours that would trigger overtime. Is that correct?
It's 40 hours that triggers overtime.
40 times, 40.
But the Board of
Let me just say this too. We're talking 40 hours in a week. I looked at at our timesheets, and I personally can say for myself anyway, 40 hours in a week that would be an 80 hours pay period, and I don't think all three of us come within 1/4 of that at the most combined.
I don't think anyone has ever reached over 40 hours in 2 weeks, but as long as there's some
right. Little, and that's in 2 weeks, and we're predicated for overtime on the 1 week.
Right. So we're really in no danger, but, and this is another discussion. My feeling is that we don't have to have timesheets. We have to have time summaries that come up to a number of hours, which is to say, if we worked 15 hours, we summarize what we did. But all the government seems to care about is that there's a number there that says, okay, this is what we worked this week, and that number is under 40. And it's never been anywhere near that. That's what we know. But, I mean, that's some discussion of how we're going to, let's say, record that weekly, hourly total.
Well,
And
Robert?
yes.
First off, yes, having an hourly rate will help us comply with the federal law, even if feasibly and realistically we're in no danger of breaking
Right.
it. The other thing to be aware of is as you're talking about how you were filling out your timesheets and in
Right.
what format, the Board of Auditors has no authority to determine that for you. They set the hourly rate. They are not allowed to tell you that you
Right.
must use this specific form or do anything like that. So that's a discussion for the board to have
Yeah.
as a policy
Right.
for employees.
Well, for the board, and I think Ron is part of that because, as you know, I sent a letter both to Frank and to Holly saying, looking for advice, and they both said, well, this is a legal matter. So we should talk about that with Ron. And the other thing that I think should be clear with the auditors is this. I don't know where this started here, but there is no basis in the second-class township code of saying that the supervisors can be paid on the basis of seniority, which has been going on for years. But they basically should be paid at the same rate. There is no, they can be paid with rates that are comparable to other, to what's paid in the localities for the same services, but not on the basis of seniority.
Well, but let's just take a devil's advocate for a moment. If the rates in the locality are based upon seniority, then they're within their rights to base it upon seniority.
If that's true. Right.
If that's what's in the area.
But I think what's been going on for years, which is just accepted, is, well, the new guy gets less, the old guy gets more.
Which may be correct in some areas, but again, we'd have to determine comparably if that's what occurs in our area.
So it's based on the comparables, not on seniority itself, which is what it seems to be now.
And you should know that if the auditors do not meet again, then we will have a discussion as to whether or not we want to bring an action against them in mandamus.
Right.
To require them to meet. That would be an action in the county court. And whether or not it would be considered, them not meeting, be considered violating their duties, then as Julia aptly notes, it could also be a summary offense, which is sort of like a traffic ticket, but there's also, it is quasi-criminal, if you will, so.
Well, or if
So
they
we'll
meet,
deal with that if they don't want to meet again.
or if they meet and they don't do
Right,
not follow
and
the
they don't
code.
do what they're supposed to do, correct.
All right.
So, all right, I'm
Just
finished.
before
Brian,
we
you'll-
That tomorrow, by the way, you're gonna copy that tomorrow, because I'm sending it here to the auditors as their main address, if you will.
just before
And we'll see it tomorrow also, Ron.
Yes, everyone will get a copy there, big guy.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting tomorrow.
He said we'll see it tomorrow.
I'll see you.
Yeah. No, just before we entertain any motions to adjourn, I just want to clarify because Martha asked about a general overview of what this is about, but I'm also going to say, can't speak to the seniority, but I would say that we're still getting comparable rates from other municipalities and their titles, so we can compile that information because, not only are we arguing that they are falsely and improperly, if not illegally, setting de facto caps and hours, but they also set a rate that is certainly not comparable to what anyone else is getting either in terms of the increase at 3%, whereas we gave staff 6% at minimum to meet inflation. But in any case, Martha, as you know, the Board of Auditors sets the compensation for elected supervisors that work in appointed positions, and this past month, when they had their meeting, they promised to vote on our compensation, and they did so without setting a rate per the second-class township code, and that would abide with federal rules. And they also approved raises that paled, and I don't want to say paled, but they were not fair compared to what we had asked for. It was a $2 an hour raise, and we forewent a raise at all in 2021, even though in the last 2 years we've raised staff about an average of 11%, so we were in line with where we might have been, not seeking to make things up, but to be in line with the market. And so essentially, because they did not set a rate in accordance with that, they have not actually completed their duty. So presently, our pay is based on the rate from last year. We feel it is better to err on the side of caution, and then if indeed the court or they agree to a more reasonable rate that fits our needs, as well as Ron on a legal note, then we will not pursue anything against them. So that's what the question is. It's whether or not they are actually acting in accordance with the code, and I think it's pretty clear we feel they're not. So we're going to see what happens with that. All right. Motion would be in order to adjourn this meeting.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Barrett. Second. Second by Mr. Levenheim. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 8:45 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. Martha, Tim, thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.